It would be nice if we just had the handhelds. We'll have to submit a request to
like on like
BMS.
Bobby Altoff's thing where they just hold the mics.
We're not going to get in bed with each other, but
I mean, I won't rule it out. Yeah, but like that. Or
I was thinking about like whenever I see pictures of Chapo, they're all just like on a couch. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, we're all just on a couch.
yeah, but we got these erector sets around.
You know, to our credit, we are all on 4 different sitting things at all times. It's positively luxurious to have 4 different sitting things.
Whoever our historian is needs to add that to the to their 202 wiki.
Yeah, BMS's intern. Yeah, can you imagine a wiki? I should just make the EDSS Extended Universe wiki. Because, you know, it'll be that thing where, like, sometimes people, like, post a screenshot of, like, Richard Nixon and then, like, some basic, like, biographical facts of it, but you'll see they looked it up on, like, the Phineas and Ferb wiki or something like that. I hope that people will look up information about Cesar Sayoc on the Energy Drink Soccer Show. Wikipedia.
It's Alex!
Well, it's episode 257 of View from 202. Is that right? That's right. All 4 of us are here. And it's also refreshing. We're recording an episode only a couple days after a match. And we only have 1 match to cover. And boy, what a match it was. Despite...
Rivalry match.
Yeah, rivalry. Despite how unpleasant the match was, there's something nice and refreshing about a bit of normalcy in those terms. But first things first, Sam, the most important information from your trip. How many Venezia kits did you see across Europe and in Venice? Because as we all know, that's the real marker of club success, is how many kits you see across a city. Is Venice just absolutely swarming with Venezia? I don't even know if it's FC, AC, what they call themselves. Venezia.
Absolutely buzzing.
Yeah.
I didn't see a single one, to
Wow.
be honest.
I saw one in New York the other day, which is
Whoa.
what really matters.
Did you see a lot of...
I actually saw one. So we went to like, I went with Emily. Emily's sister gave us a recommendation that she saw on like TikTok, and we were just like of a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So just like, you know, tourist trap in Venice. And we were just like being good sports and going.
Mm-hmm.
And all other like people there were just American travelers too.
Nice.
And that's the only time I ever saw the Venezia kits.
Oh, I was going to say...
So it was just Americans who went to like this store, which must have been nearby because they had the little bags, and that was it.
Like, it would be like the equivalent of seeing someone with a Lego store bag or M&M store bag.
Yeah,
in New
exactly.
York.
Well, all the little like, you know, like little like kitschy souvenir stands, like they just had like AC Milan and like Inter jerseys and like Fiorentina. They didn't have any like Venezia.
That's what Italians
kits.
think.
Yeah.
On the way back
ground.
from lunch today in downtown Brooklyn, I saw a baby in a stroller wearing an Arsenal kit, and his older brother, probably like 6 years old, wearing a PSG kit. So, soccer made in America. I don't know if you guys know this, but
That's so
it's
true.
here.
Did you see stickers telling you tourists to get out of the city of Venice?
I did not see any. No. One really cool thing we did actually do when we were there was we went to the AC Milan Turin game on like the 26th.
Oh.
So that was the home opener. So we went to San Siro, and that was really fucking cool.
Nice.
So
Where'd
you got
you
to see
sit?
Giroud play?
We sat in the like the 200s, near all the supporters. So we were like
You
in
sat
like
in 202.
I wanted to, but there were no seats available. But we sat in like the red terrace. So
Cool.
Yeah, we were really close to the supporters who were
You got to see
insane.
a bunch of old Chelsea players play.
Yeah, I saw 2 Giroud goals.
Nice. One of them was Pulisic. Yeah.
Scored his. I think his second goal.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Teo Hernandez. I think scored the fourth one. Yeah, they popped off.
How many years does San Siro have left at this point? Did they decide not to tear it down?
I think it's still TBD. I think that both clubs are still kind of like struggling to agree on a new stadium plan. And I think AC Milan is like, as far as I saw, like they're eager to move forward, and Inter is like still kind of dragging their feet because of club finances.
Do they want to play in the giant mall in Milan? Oh, they have like a giant mall.
How would that work, huh?
It's basically,
How would you play in a mall? Did you think about that before you said that? Into the microphone?
I'm thinking about the Riveters who play at the American Dream Mall in East Rutherford.
Or Red Bull's sister club, Hartford Whalers, also.
Right. Or like the New England Patriots, I suppose.
In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's exciting, though, to see an actual old-timey classic ground. I don't know how many I've been to. I guess I've been to the Bernabeu, and then
You went to the remains of Highbury.
that's true. Well, I didn't get to. Well, the Emirates is basically a vintage ground right now. Vintage
Sure.
ground, RBA.
I am
13 years old.
If I do go to London when soccer is happening, I am trying to see, I think, a game at Stamford Bridge before that probably disappears into a modern stadium of some sort.
Did they tear down Upton Park? That's what it was called, right? Did I screw that? The old West Ham ground. I made that up, didn't I? I just pulled a random thing. I think they did tear it down, which is sad. But
Yeah, it feels weird to watch the games that are played at Olympic or whatever.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to go to Goodison before Everton go to the new stadium and get relegated. So
They're playing the championship in a 80,000 person stadium,
Well,
just like the Red Bulls.
it would be a bit exciting in a bad way
To be in a
if we had
battle?
relegation.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm coming around on this idea because we've put it off as long as we can. We're coming to you after a 4-1 loss to the Philadelphia Union, which is the end of what is safe to say really the nadir of this season. After losses to in successive weeks, the Miami one, of course, that we covered in depth in sort of an existential way last episode, then the New England one, and now the Philadelphia one in 3 weeks in a row. Any sort of lingering hopes of playoffs seem both mathematically more difficult and sort of besides the point, I think. To me, and everyone feel free to correct me if you disagree or interject. To me, this is really sort of the end of the season. Right here, this kind of puts a big exclamation point on it. And going forward, I think our next game is what I would like to refer to as sort of the last game of the season. Because we're playing City away at Yankee Stadium for our second league match against them this year. Second of the two. We had the League's Cup match as well. They are also having a terrible time. So this is like maybe some nice opportunity to be the top rat in the bucket, so to speak, and push them down. But after that, the stakes are pretty low. This season seems like it is really kind of bottomed out here. So maybe this episode is an opportunity to look further a bit instead of circling the drain with our despair, because I know the last couple episodes have been a bit low on the morale front. So maybe we can think about longer term changes to the club or what would get our blood flowing again. But that said, this was a 4-1 loss, and is there anything we want to cover here in terms of the X's and O's on this? We do come out to a 1-0 lead briefly at Chester, thanks to Omir Fernandez, and thanks to a common Andres Reyes overlap from the side and scoring a ball into the middle. When we were 1-0 up, how did people feel about our chances of holding on? Did it seem like we had a game on our hands here?
So I feel like I only watched like the first half like pretty intently. But I feel like the moment that I started getting concerned was when it was like after we scored and we were like, playing like pretty defensively and just like allowing all this pressure. But there was like a clear chance for Tolkien to, instead of like just boot the ball out, like try to like play it up the field a little bit more, but like he just kind of booted it out like Aurelian Collin used to do, like every single time he got the ball in the final, like in the defensive third. And I feel like that happened. And then there are a few more moments where we did the exact same thing, and it just felt like we had no actual outlet or like way to avoid what was about to happen. And I just feel like at that point, I was just like, oh my God. And then, the floodgates opened after that.
Yeah, I mean, just to give the most like global possible take on the game, there were. I mean, it's been happening for a few weeks now, and as the season's sort of, as we've just said, grinded to a somewhat premature halt, but that the players do seem kind of out of it. And it's not to single out any individuals. It's just the team as a whole kind of senses what I think the fan base as a whole has sensed over the last, month or so, several weeks, summer, whatever, that this season's not really going anywhere. There's you don't really need to put your neck on the line for what's being built in Harrison this year. And that is this is a game where those margins come into play. I still think, it's a team that could be doing better than it's doing right now, but when your team is just, not that motivated and sort of checked out and going through a dead season, you're going to have more games where guys are just, a step too slow on closing somebody down, a little bit, too loose with a pass, just little moments like that, lead up to games like this. I mean, it's not like, Philly was, setting the world on fire. It was a pretty standard kind of Philly RBNY game, maybe a little less open in RBNY's favor than the one we had a few weeks ago where they were breaking out on the wings a lot, but still just another kind of cagey, press versus press game, but one team seemed to have a sense of purpose and a sense of, kind of organization and drive, and then the other team was just kind of going through the motions. And it's not to single anybody out or really blame them. I mean, it's hard to get up for September game when you're in 13th place and the big trophy that you have in front of you, the big carrot for the rest of the season, is like a ninth place playoff spot. I don't think anybody is actually fully invested in that as a like galvanizing force, and that's what's going to lead to more and more games like that, and why, as our thesis led up, it is somewhat of the end of the season.
It feels like I was just thinking, like, I haven't really been on an episode in a while. Like the last time that I think I was like here, we were still at about like 2 points per game with Lissen.
Yeah.
And it's just like crazy to like come back to this. And I remember one of the themes was like playing with house money. And that was something that we talked about as some like being excited and looking forward to, seeing this team try to do. And it feels like we're not really playing with house money, or even if we are, we're folding on like the first hand, like every time. And so nits. Like we're just playing conservatively for no real reason. And I could see that like when there's like nothing to lose and you try shit, like there's a way to get motivated for that, but it doesn't even seem like we're doing that anymore. And it just feels like everything's so flat and lifeless.
You're like going through the motions and not really like, you're not like playing with the swagger or the cockiness of, hey, there is nothing left to play for. I'm just going to ruin everyone else's day at this table by like being an asshole.
They don't even seem, interested in that. Yeah.
Right. Just no pride. I mean, like when we scored, my reaction was, man, we're going to be lucky to get out of here with a 1-1. And that's probably going to be the best result we get. Like immediately after I saw that goal, I mean, like I felt like Philly are a team that are always up for it when they play us.
Too up for it.
A little bit, yeah. It's just like you don't need to do that. I mean, it's just...
I mean, yeah, just to get it out of the way so we can get back to roasting RBNY, because that's what the people want. But Philly continues to be such spazzes about, this, so-called rivalry. It's still, even though we're definitely on the bottom end of the stick, and we're the shitty ones now. It's still clearly so much of a rivalry for them. It matters so much more to them than it does for us. I don't think Coronel would ever be running down the field like Andre Blake was this night. I don't think Luis Robles would have been running down the field for a September win over Philly. Like,
No.
get out of here.
He didn't do that for City games.
Yeah,
he had some respect.
Like it's just and then
for ourselves, not them.
Curtin had his comments earlier this summer, and obviously, but even more, it's just like, yeah, you could see. I mean, more power to them, I guess, because they got the result. But like, yeah, they're so much more queued up and spazzed out for this than we are, and I think that's one very small victory, but a victory nonetheless.
Yeah, but also, like, I don't know, when I was watching this game, which, like you guys were kind of half-eyed, half falling asleep, half doing something else, it was just like, yeah, it's like watching adults play against, like, college kids a little bit almost, and that's kind of, I think, what the makeups of these teams are. So it's like, yeah, why are you beating up so much on, like, especially this current version of this team, because it's just like the discrepancy or the gap in, I think, like, talent or even bite of players was like very evident when you watch just like how people were passing confidently or like making runs into space or even like requesting someone to make a run while you're on the ball. Like how many times do you see one of our midfield just coming like, hey, come in here, like when they've received a ball, there's just no confidence, no pride.
But the goals are a pretty good cross section of that too. I mean, the equalizer, just like no one really being sharp or hustling to clear the corner sufficiently. The third goal in particular is a lot of standing around and sort of guys getting stuck in the mud a bit. To
add one more little angle or a bit of color to this malaise that the team was in the other night and is in more long term. Jim Curtin, our pal, he had another rant about the Red Bulls. He still couldn't keep our names out of his mouth after the game the other night. But this time he was a little more succinct in saying that the set piece goals and the set piece danger that they were creating was pretty simply the fact that our Red Bulls, our team, is pretty short. Mm-hmm.
I've noticed
just on a very literal level
across the course of the season.
Very few, literally, basically only the center backs in some lineups we put out are the only guys over 6 foot in the team, and there's a lot of guys who are 5'6", 5'7", so that is an issue on set pieces no matter how you play, and then especially if we're going to play a robust physical way. You need to have a little bit more, size and muscle on the field. And, again, not to play someone's advocate as I always am, but I mean, that, is part of the rationale for Barlow playing. If people are still, so, perplexed by that, I mean, it's just this team is not very well built after the last couple years, and, It's a talent issue in a more broad sense, but then when you get to even more kind of granular stuff like that, it's hard to tell where the rubber meets the road when you hear, Red Bull executives talk about, identity, and just everything being according to a certain rubric. And then you see stuff like that, and it's just like, is there a rubric? It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting because that used to be an advantage we had very distinctly over City, is that we would be consistently bigger than them all the way around. And now, we have 4 forwards that we cycle through, but like don't really have a quality third center back. So when we have a guy like Nealis get sent off for 2 yellows, we're playing Hassan and Dom, who I'm sure is, very nice guy, but is not really top of the list for center back coverage in MLS. I mean, he's literally a retread from like 5 years ago. We just picked up as a free agent. We went from Sean Nealis being a high quality third center back on our roster to now basically not having anybody. It's not rocket science for why that's not a competitive recipe I have a couple thoughts though about like, the motivation factor as well, which is I do wonder whether, and this could be league wide, not just Red Bull, whether there's an aspect of like fighting for that ninth place. Now that there's 9 places, sort of subconscious acknowledgement that like that like so many people get in now. If you're the ninth place team in the conference, do you really even have a chance, or like is it even really worthwhile to push for that? Because back when it was just 6 and 7,
it
usually
felt some prestige to making the playoffs.
Yeah,
on its own.
And there would be some, and I guess we'll see how many ninth place teams or whatever knock people off. I mean, I guess it could still happen.
Hey, now the Miami Heat were like, what weren't they? Didn't they?
Yeah.
They were 8th, right? And then they made a run all the way to the final.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it could still happen, but I guess there's.
But also, like the Miami Heat were a team
not to
that,
take away from your point, though.
Well,
I mean, it is. I don't know. We'll see how it happens in the actual playoffs. Maybe there will be a bunch of 9th and 8th seeds that successfully topple guys. Looking at this Red Bull side, though, I feel like I do kind of get the feeling that
it's not us.
We're not really like, yeah.
Yeah, it was like the point I was going to make to that was like, yeah, well, the Miami Heat were a team that were like built stealthily to be good, like when they could heat up.
Well,
but this is not.
Maybe we could do that in like
2021.
Right, exactly.
Like,
but
and we almost got away with it.
But the more that I watch us, it's like, oh, we're just kind of like putting our there's no more juice to squeeze.
The other factor, motivation wise, is really the Miami game. I think also must have been killer. And as we said on last week's episode, it was sort of funny that like the mathematical like 6-pointer nature of it kind of was underrated, or like that wasn't the main thing that came to mind watching that game. It didn't help mathematically, but the main thing was just like the morale effect of being the away team, being conscripted into the Washington Generals role at your own stadium must make everything feel pointless, And it's not like a first place team coming in and being a massive club over you. I think like the fact that Miami is still one of the worst teams in the league, or like they're still second worst in the table right now, might add even more of a sense of farce to the players themselves, where it's like, oh, well, like, look how many people showed up and like went apeshit over that team, and they're not even good. Like, they're not even going to win the league. Might also make everything seem a little fake and pointless to the players too. I mean, and as we discussed on last episode, they clearly had a great time anyway, like hugging Messi after the match. So like, yeah, like it all feels kind of like probably pointless to them, and that was probably really the thing, because leading up to that match, our form in like Leagues Cup was pretty good. Remember, we had, as bizarre as that is, we had won 3 games, and we had won 2 games in Leagues Cup, and then lost on penalties in Leagues Cup to Philly, and then win against DC in the league. That's 3 wins and a draw, and then we won in penalties against New England too. So I think really that Miami game just a couple weeks ago was pretty killer too. Any sense of this season having stakes or mattering for reasons we talked about at length last week. And, now that I look at it again, the contrast between playing Philadelphia in Leagues Cup last month and on Sunday is maybe also telling as well. That's a game a month ago where we, was not a very entertaining game to watch, but still kind of went tete-a-tete with Philadelphia for a lot of it. And this one, the wheels fall off a little quicker, a little easier. Now maybe we're looking towards the end of the season a bit more. But yeah, not a good day, and I feel comfortable saying it, probably the lowest point in club history since 2010 at least. But we've got this game against City coming up. They're doing a terrible time. They're having a terrible time as well. This, I guess, is probably the last game that I'll feel any sort of emotional actual pull on, because as shitty as the season has been, getting a foot up on them is always enjoyable. Had a good vintage time at the Derby earlier this season at RBA, where it was nice to get a clean win against them too. I think it'd be good to spend this episode thinking about, like, what does a way out of this hole potentially look like for this club right now? What would we want to see that could potentially get us back onto a better vibe in the club, both like in terms of results, but also just spiritually, sort of existentially, about making it seem like this club cares about soccer and results at all, rather than like promotions week after week. Is there anything in the off season? Are there any signs, any particular junctures that we could pin our hopes on? And are there any models for club reboots that might be useful in thinking in these terms?
Well, I had asked before we were recording, just because I don't think I started really following this team at all until like 2013, 14, when you brought us to the game, the Chicago game, Brit. But just like what, the vibes now are as bad, or people are saying we're as bad, or worse than they were in 09, being like one of the darker times in the kind of club's like history. And so just like one of the questions I had was just like, what happened after that season, and like, is that, even relevant to kind of what we're looking at the end of this year going into 2024. But just like, what was that all about?
Well, it was, I guess that's one of the main key differences that came to me just now, as opposed to when we were talking pre-show, was that the arena opening the next year in 2010 was sort of a unavoidably galvanizing moment, and just the sort of thing that raised everybody's level, and brought new eyeballs onto things, and just created sort of an impetus to do some of the big gestures that ended up taking place and eventually culminating in Thierry Henry and Rafa Marquez. But the more kind of nuts and bolts side of that was that, obviously 2009, as Sam mentioned, was at least since Red Bull's come in, the worst season in club history, and sort of the low watermark for things. And obviously Juan Carlos Osorio was let go at the end of that season. And then the new, I believe, and Jeff Agus was also let go after being GM. And it became a situation where they had kind of a clean slate to put in a whole new sporting apparatus for the first time in a while. And this was 2010, when MLS was, really starting to get a little bit more serious about sort of building clubs. It's easy to forget that before MLS, it was, MLS clubs, so to speak, were basically just a team of 20 guys renting an NFL stadium, and then just like kind of a bare bones front office. There wasn't like a deep operation going on. So 2010 was an interesting moment to have kind of like a big clean slate to start to build something big. And by MLS standards, they kind of did that even before Henry came in, by bringing in Eric Soler and Hans Baca. Eric Soler being the sporting director who was brought in after being sort of an Asian bigwig around Scandinavia for a while. And then in tandem with Hans Baca, of course, the veteran Swedish manager. And kind of a situation, it predates what Red Bull is now. If my recollection is correct, I believe basically the Red Bull operation, the Red Bull soccer operation, or internationally, was just Gerard Houllier as a consultant, just sort of kind of getting different projects whenever they need to be done. There weren't these 6 layers of redundant coordinators and things like that run Red Bull so efficiently now. It was just kind of the office sending some guys out there, sending an Ace Rothstein out to New York to, take care of things and watch over things. And even though like I keep, kind of framing this, that it was sort of a different context and a different time, I think that's a fairly instructive, sort of, or maybe instructive isn't the right word, but maybe a more kind of useful and something worth thinking about as Red Bull potentially changes things now. Because I've been kind of saying on this show recently and maybe a little bit on Twitter here and there that I think a very healthy thing that Red Bull could do with New York right now that they have not done in a while is just hire a coach who has already has a resume, already has a track record, doesn't need to prove anything about himself. Just a guy who knows what he's doing and can be plugged in and get a team, just sort of chugging and winning games, isn't trying to find himself as a manager, isn't trying to reinvent the wheel tactically, just a manager, just somebody with experience who can just come in and set a little bit of a standard of what the club wants to be, as opposed to, building his career and looking out for himself. Because, I mean, they got lucky with Jesse Marsh, but even that ended up having some collateral damage for the long-term planning of the club when he cooed Curtis and then left, mid-season. And, beyond that, we've just seen a lot of, basically interim coaches. I mean, Petke was essentially an interim for 2 years. We had Carnell, who actually was working out, but then we let him leave. Even going upstairs, I mean, there was, we, of course, on this show, we were sort of fond of this for some of the reasons I'm laying out, but the Kevin Thelwell era, where that was the last moment where Red Bull sort of hinted at, okay, we're going to bring in somebody from outside who knows what he's doing and has a track record, and we're going to let him cook in New York for a little bit. They let him cook for about 2 years until they decided that building, Matishit's little friend Gerhard Struber's resume was more important club priority, and then he eventually decided to bail. Mm-hmm. So I think just empowering somebody who actually has, credentials and a track record to go off of, would be so helpful. Not just leaving somebody who, let's not just have Dennis Hamlet being left in charge because Red Bull trusts him from their, helicopter parenting over the last 5-6 years with all these ridiculous layers of management from Austria. Let's go back to just, Red Bull is just kind of a consultant office, and let's actually let somebody be in charge of New York and do their own thing with the operation. I mean, they keep talking about, we need to have synergy between Bragantino and Austria, and how much are any of these individual clubs really gaining from that? Right. I think these individual clubs actually gain from Red Bull having a lot of money and being able to spend more than a lot of teams overnight. I don't think, that having some ridiculous, kind of quicksand of synergy and these like rubrics for how you're supposed to sign players really helps any of these clubs independently. I think Red Bulls should finally just kind of strip things down a little bit and just hire a New York sporting director and a New York head coach who get along with each other, hopefully, and let's actually just have a team here instead of just an offshoot of, a million, different competing priorities and all this kind of stuff, or just have it as an offshoot of MLS. I mean, God knows that's what the commercial office has been treating the club like, that we're just the Washington Generals to the Messi show. Yeah. Let's have a sporting director and a head coach who have pride in their jobs, who don't have to reinvent the wheel, who don't have to prove anything about themselves, and let's just see how they do. I think just on a caveman level, I think that would be a very good project to pursue.
Yeah, that's a good shout. For as much as we've complained and bemoaned correctly about Gerhard Struber the last 2-3 years, it is underrated the extent to which when we hired him, he basically didn't have any real experience. I mean, he had half a season in the championship with Barnsley
during COVID,
which was, and the point isn't really his results here. The point is his experience, which is, he was pretty not established as a manager, and egg on my face, I won't speak on behalf of the full podcast, but I was excited at the time because I thought it might echo what happened with Jesse, as Cork laid out. That was someone who was viciously ambitious in a way that did have collateral damage to the club long term, but was successful in a sense for us, certainly, in that he just had a sense of standards and wanted to at least pursue excellence on an individual level, which coming out of the Armas era, what felt very needed. I do think that's a very good analysis, though, of how even taking a step further back, just having someone with basic standards and professionalism in place is definitely what the club needs right now. And Thelwell, in so many ways, did seem to promise that. I mean, just so many of the things he said about like setting up redundancy, setting up like, names and just like scouting guidelines for players and personnel that you might want to hire just in case, has felt very relevant to me as, now that we've gotten rid of our manager finally, it seems like we just didn't really have anything in place to consider what we would do behind just like reappointing our new managers, like former assistant. But in terms of like backfilling other sporting or technical roles, that seems to be just hanging in limbo. So I do think, something more like a Hans Backe hire, just someone who gets on the same page with the sporting director, does feel like a move that is sorely needed, and some sort of just autonomy from the sporting director.
Well, and again, I suppose that sporting director could be Jochen Schneider, but for reasons that we've laid out on this podcast over the course of this year and maybe less so last year, I think he's kind of disqualified himself.
Yeah.
It's been about as bad as a year and a half as you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
For the overall administration of this club.
Yeah. And the fact that Dennis Hamlet is still here while he's here, I think is also sort of disqualifying. Dennis Hamlet clearly needs to go. And I will say it's, by all means, it doesn't seem like he's competent at the job, but that's almost seems to miss the point to me in a way too, where it's like, does he even do the job that we want to be doing? Like,
yeah, I was going to say one of the things that like would maybe assure me about the future of this club is if there's this sense that there are standards being put into place, or like there's an expectation that's kind of like well communicated, or like even if we have a rubric or of some sort where it's like, hey, we're not like getting the points, we're not scoring the goals, we're not like there doesn't seem to be, like we're saying, standards or any kind of expectations.
Well, those were notes that Thelwell hit when he fired Armas that we loved. Those are also notes that Colorado recently hit when they fired Robin Fraser, which felt like a world away from where we are right now. But, over the years, there have been critiques of Hamlet, being like, oh, he doesn't, more along the lines of like, he doesn't know how to do a transfer. He's not using all of our DP slots. And to me, that's a little like getting lost in the weeds. To me, it's not necessarily his like the dollar amounts he's spending, although, he's certainly not doing a good job by any metric you want to do it. It's the fact that his entire role seems almost to just be like fluff, like insulation to avoid knowing really who's in charge, or like, I don't think that we need both the sporting director and a head of sport. I was like putting up with it for a little while when Thelwell was here, when it seemed like maybe a necessary evil to like transition him in. I guess the potential rationale was that, Dennis Hamlet would know all of the weird allocation money stuff. Unclear if that was even really necessary. At this point, he needs to go. Any sort of faith in the project would require him not being there. Not so much because I think he even like is an active detriment to the club, but he's sort of a reflection of the fact that the club is stagnant and sitting in nowhere.
Right.
And has no ambitions or direction about what it even wants to do in the first place. So in that sense, he's more like a barometer of everything being off, or like
I'm willing to trade a few, Central American prospect loans a year to have a more coherent front office.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
It's like, what do you
maybe
even
Red
do
Bull,
here?
maybe Austria is not okay with that, but I think New York should have a little bit higher standards for what they want out of a sporting director here.
Yeah. And I'll build on our last episode too a bit in terms of talking about like the spiritual rot at the club. I kind of think like a reset and a flushing out of like the business and like comms side is kind of necessary for people to care about this club right now. Like, it's not the most important thing.
Well, just commercial side overall, I feel like, if we saw even a honorary departure somehow of kind of like Mark the Grand Prix going somewhere else, with maybe inside the Red Bull org somehow to reward him for his years of service. But, I think there's this commercial kind of...
Is there what is the actual path to having somebody like Mark de Grand Prix out of the club? What does that even look like?
It's just an ownership decision, or it would be him retiring. Basically, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's a great question. Who is in charge?
Who is it? Right.
Because this is something I've rattled around a couple years, where at times I've wanted just having a more coherent club president, or we don't really have a board the way that other clubs do,
like a CEO.
We don't have a CEO.
Yeah.
To my not technically somebody can maybe bust out some dossier somewhere that says we do, but in effect we don't. Mintzlaff is seems to be doing F1 stuff or whatever now, or is in charge of Red Bull, just the overarching company. Who does hire and fire de Grand Prix? I may have said this off air and not on the show, but I do actually kind of believe that Marc de Grand Prix probably really likes his job. It's actually very plausible to me that Marc de Grand Prix might like working for Red Bull New York more than anyone else in that office in a way. And I could see this being sort of a sinecure, the rest of Red Bull's Mark, you've done a great job. We're going to let you work in your favorite job in the organization. But he's clearly just chasing the wrong priorities. He's off doing his own weird stuff that is just not right, and we don't need to go into too much detail if you listen to previous episodes, I don't think. But it's
anyway confirmed that LAFC did not, I think, sell the Messi shirts.
So it's a good detail. Yeah, LAFC was not selling the Messi goat shirts. So, but Red Bull's decided to, one way or the other. And I guess the latest is that people are sharing around all these great key stats from the Messi game. That gift shop revenue was up 50%, which, okay, I take it back. I apologize. Everything's going great. I've been such a fucking downer this whole episode.
We didn't believe. We're suckers now.
They sold the hip hop kit, so.
We have enough money to book the coaches to the next away match now because of the gift shop revenue going up by 50%. But yeah, it's a Grand Prix, but also I don't know,
for one game, 50% for one game should be added.
Yeah.
I get, and I've said this on previous episodes too, I get that it's sort of just a funk in the way that sports business seems to be right now. And I think Lord knows the communications of other sports clubs is really embarrassing too, just across the board. The general tone that's in vogue right now is sort of infantilizing and dumb, but this year I've also just felt extra embarrassed of the club, just the way that the club tweets about its result, the way that the club tweets about everything, the way that the club does its communications is just very embarrassing. It's really just doesn't make me want to identify with the club or tell anyone about the club that I follow it. It's just really undignified, and I will briefly just mention again what we said last episode of having club personnel going in public and being oh, I'm really proud of the work we did after the Messi game is just mind-blowingly humiliating. So I don't think I'll be fully back in love with this club until changes are made there too.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe to dovetail that a little bit more with actual on-field stuff. I mean, part of de Grand Prix's grand media tour was that obviously him saying that there's going to be more spending next year, and that they're finally going to pull out all the stars are going to be here finally. But that sort of flies in the face of them seeming, and again, this is just club comms and just fluff content that they're obligated to put out. But also they seem to have been very sincerely bought into the idea that the story they're selling, the thing that's supposed to be compelling to people about the New York Red Bulls, is that we have this academy with all these kids, and we have all these young players, and we have Jamai, and we have Edelman, and all these little guys, and it's just I don't see how they're going to pivot from that to all of a sudden buying a bunch of guys. If they do, I guess that's great. But I don't know. That whole context makes me both reluctant to believe that they're actually going to be changing the technical planning of the club, and B, that it's going to be done well or competently.
Yeah.
You know?
Or cohesively.
Also, like, who the hell? We talked about this last week, but like, who the hell do you even buy to excite people anymore? Who isn't Messi?
Right.
Or are we gonna buy like fucking Mudryk for like 120 million?
We bought a bunch. I mean, the one transfer window, or the first transfer window Thelwell was in charge of, people were pretty jacked up, and it was just a bunch of randos then, but it was, you know, a bunch of guys, and it felt like we were actually putting a new core together. It wasn't just like, you know, here's your little Van Zier signing, you freaks.
Although, hey, I guess to argue with myself a bit, we were confused how jazzed people were about that. So, like, you know, okay, maybe it will work to some extent.
Yeah, when Jochen Schneider signs Otani, it'll be...
Yeah. How hard could it be to just kick a ball?
Yeah, what if Japan's best athletes?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. A lot of work to be done. It's unclear if it matters to anyone, both in charge and just anyone in general.
That's part of why it feels so, like, laboring for us, too, or, like, kind of nebulous, is that there doesn't seem to be any stakes for our organization. Like, our owner's a little too rich in that sense, almost, where it's like, oh, like...
We don't have an owner. Our owner is a blob of money. Our owner is a blob of weird little, like, email chains.
Yeah, like, what's the sunk cost of, like, 40 million to this, like... You know, they literally have an F1 team, 2 F1 teams to worry about or whatever.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, what is the metric of success for us? Like, what are the stakes and what are the consequences if we fail? Right.
Yeah. And it is interesting that we're playing City this week while we're talking about this too, because it all applies to them too. Like, what is the point?
Yeah, no.
And it's, you know, the fact that they won the cup one year is also just sort of like, oh, it didn't really matter, did it?
Yeah. Apparently Maxi Morales tore his ACL or something.
Oh, yeah, that's got to be it for him. That's got to be curtains. But the fact that he... And who was the other guy? Urso Jr.? I should actually... That's one guy I remember a little bit more. Like, both left and then came back before me noticing also feels like a very 2020
I thought you were saying another City guy, but yeah, Junior Urso did that for Atlanta.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just now, too.
Just in terms of people leaving and coming
as
back.
As did Balu Tabla, that Barca guy, too.
Oh, that's a throwback. It took him a couple years to come back, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, just dearth of ideas and, you know, transfer planning and stuff like that. Just signing old guys and old boys because you know, it's too much work.
Right.
To go out and actually scout somebody and sign them.
I guess since this is the last time we're playing City this year, maybe we'll indulge this as well, which is it's sort of bizarre to think that City also seem to not give a shit. They're in the Cushing zone, kind of just flushed out players, but kind of similar to us, have spent like a weird medium amount of money on the squad in a weird way. They're terrible form. They're basically exact same place we are in the table. Seem to have lost all hope, but like simultaneously, they're going through the steps to allegedly spend $500 million to build a stadium. It doesn't seem right. Like what? Like what? You are for that?
Is that still like on track?
Yeah,
that's still tracking.
It's pretty.
For like 3
it's
years.
pretty in motions right now.
Is it
feels like
3 years out? 4? I don't know.
Well,
I don't
don't
think
know if the
their
environmental
proposed
review-
deadline's ever going to be hit, but
it hasn't. Well, all right, watch out. It hasn't gone through ULERP yet, so that's going to take at least a year. And all that. But, you know, the council... At this rate, they might not even do it before the council member leaves, because the council member for that district is, like, a NYCFC goober. And, like, I think he's only got 2 years left.
yeah,
so they're sort of on the clock.
Us on the podcast are on the record as pro-gambling in this one instance to build the casino.
Right.
Yeah, we're rooting for Steve Cohen to sabotage it all.
Yeah, but it just feels, because also and we were talking about this the other week too, where it's like the fact that City aren't spending or really don't care. It's not like they're saving up money to build the stadium. Like, remember when like Arsene Wenger was like, "Oh, we can't spend big on transfers because, we're paying off the stadium." That whole sentiment and idea is gone in global football altogether. Like the
Money is fake.
Yeah.
You can just print money.
Right. Like also like City spent like $10 million or something on that Magno guy, and like they're still spending money. Like they're not saving money to build the stadium, but it's also like, do you really want to do that? Like it really just feels like they're gonna get to like shovels entering the ground and be like, oh wait, no, I'm good.
We don't need to do
Yeah,
this.
like
What are we
what?
doing?
Like
Yeah.
what? Like do we really want to do this? Like maybe it'll just
Like
sit there.
a 25,000 seat stadium, like a second tier stadium in the biggest city on earth, does not seem like what Gulf
It's
oligarchs have in mind
it's
when
only
they expand their
20,000.
empire overseas. Yeah,
It's only going to be 20,000.
Yeah, it's not
It's going to be
25,
solid
it's only
smaller than us.
20,000,
That's
yeah.
funny.
it's such a weirdly petty but also difficult thing to pursue,
Yeah.
as we've said for years.
I also think it's only
from the ownership's perspective.
I think it's also only a single tier stadium.
Really?
I think so.
No, I think I've seen. Did they change that? I do remember seeing.
The renders are
At
always
least
better
one of the
than it ends
walls
up
is
being,
just
but-
one tier.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so it's not like double tier all the way like we are.
I mean,
If they-
it's like all the other stadiums. that
Yeah,
have
maybe
opened
like
recently.
Nashville or whatever.
They should build it like that Russian World Cup stadium where it just like keeps going up.
yeah.
and up, like
Forever.
you could like catch a Mets game from there.
Or the Miami Stadium where they have the high school bleachers now in the corners.
Yeah.
They should just make an infield in their new stadium.
Just like have an outline of it
Yeah,
or
a little
something.
bit.
As a tribute to the past.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like make it multi-use, make it a kind of stadium for 20,000 people.
It is. Do you think people are going to be at this next derby? I hadn't really thought about it in
There
this
was-
level of detail.
you were
There was
the
a
one-
very small away crowd in Philadelphia. It was
Yeah.
like 2 rows, maybe.
But like I have not been paying attention. Remember when I used to like check what City was doing in addition to
Yeah.
us and be like, oh, what are those fuckers doing? Are they going to lose?
They're
Now I
technically
don't.
above us now.
Yeah, but like
We have a
we
couple
we have a
games
game in
ahead.
hand or
Yeah.
something. But like, are
You were
there,
the only one who had to look for tickets, right? So far. for
I didn't
this?
look at
Oh, you haven't
tickets.
even looked at tickets?
No, fucking
Oh, okay.
Nora bought the tickets because she got a free offer, or she got like a discount offered through work. So I was like, oh, isn't that the team you like? I was like, yeah, that is the team I like. Let's do that. But
That's a big step.
yeah, and well, it's like, I've been thinking about this as I've told you guys. It's like, but I'm thinking specifically about the in terms of like, is no one going to be there for like the City fans too? Like is it going to be a weirdly dead atmosphere? I don't know how their crowd is feeling.
I mean, it's always kind of a weirdly dead atmosphere there.
Yeah, but I mean, like, think about it. We were there for like the first couple games. Like it was.
I mean, we were there when there was heat going on between.
We were there when
Of
the
all the
third
things,
deck.
of all the things I would call the city atmosphere, I don't think I would call them dead.
Yeah, well, I mean, just like it's cavernous in a way where it's like it doesn't really feel as lively as like a soccer stadium.
Well,
Obviously.
yeah, that's a different thing. Yeah, but
Yeah. I mean, the one thing about Yankee Stadium that I always found sort of frustrating back when this was more, felt like a more relevant piece of discourse is the fact that it was always going to be a little bit empty, even when it was really sold out, seemed to insulate them from the fact that when they did have no one going to games, like no one noticed, because it kind of looks the same as like when a lot of people are there. So I think that kind of builds into the sort of weird.
Also, baseball stadiums default kind of look that crowded.
Although Yankee Stadium is one of the ones that is more
sold out,
consistently crowded. So I don't know. I guess I'm just hoping it's a good game.
Those two teams, I don't know if it's gonna be a good game, but
Man,
yeah.
this is beginning to feel Chivas-esque, I have to say, like a little bit. I don't know if it
you've
really
raised the specter.
I've raised the spectrum. I mean, we were joking. Chris from off the perch as well was posting about the road to fold for the longest time. But then look at us now. It might have actually just been us who was on the road to fold. But then, as we're discussing, City isn't doing hot either. I mean, yeah, they're still investing. I don't know. But just in terms of like the lack of juice in the rivalry, I brought up Chivas because like, you know, in 2007 or whatever, 2008, there's like Chivas LA Galaxy games were like pretty hype games.
Yeah.
Chivas made it to the semifinal of the playoffs at least once, if not twice. You know, this is sort of a fraught metric to measure things by, but their supporters got into it with other supporters. Like, and I think them and Houston got into a fight a couple nasty times. This is just making me think of that because like now we're looking at probably the least hyped and least prestigious matchup between these two teams yet.
Yeah, and I mean, we're also, I mean, there's this, the specter that Chris was joking about where just, go ahead and fold us and revive us Chivas style. I think obviously there's a joking element to that, but even in the De Grand Prix media tour seemed to be a, pretty direct reaction and a little bit of a scared reaction maybe to Garber being pretty blunt, a few weeks ago about saying that like, I mean, not super thrilled with what I'm seeing in New York, and why would he be? It's really weird for, one of the charter clubs in the league, one of the big clubs in the league to be, I mean, let's just face it. It's been kind of empty the last few years. There's not a lot of excitement going on. There's not a lot of, stuff to chew on here. And, this is in the, ridiculous, growing the game, all that kind of stuff that we make fun of all the time. But from Don Garber's perspective, from a coldly practical business perspective, it is becoming to be kind of a unresolved concern that the New York Red Bulls have now been increasingly irrelevant for a half decade. Mm-hmm. And it eventually gets to a point. I don't think we're really that close to where Chivas got to by the end, where their stadium was, like a couple thousand people with no supporter section and, having the league office having to run administration because there was, racism and corruption going on. But, I don't think we're quite there yet. We've had our little dips this year, certainly, but I don't think we're quite to that Chivas level yet. But I think it is an interesting thought exercise to be like, would that really be the worst thing to happen to this club, to take a year or two off? I guess Chivas to LAFC was what, like 3 years they took off?
Yeah. 2014
to 2018. So 3 seasons they took off. I don't know if I could bear 3 seasons, but really, would it be the worst thing in the world? I guess the stadium is there, and you can't have the stadium.
That's the biggest difference.
Like a white elephant, and that is a pretty big contrast with what the Chivas situation was. But still, again, worth thinking about, especially if if all we're facing in the short term is another bunch of these, mishap rebuilding years that excite nobody and depress most people.
Yeah, that also reminds me that we are breaking ground on a new training facility, which is
it's getting close. Yeah, they've gotten through most of, I think, the Morris County hoops by now. I don't know if they've officially got shovels in the ground, but it seems like it's mostly systems go.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as much money as City's stadium, but it's an investment that demonstrates they are thinking about.
They're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, which is also very not Chivas, admittedly. So, like, it's such a bizarre situation. My takeaway just from a distance is that, like, some parts of the organization seem to think they're legitimately doing a good job. And that, like, the sporting results come and go, and maybe that, like, can be fixed. And maybe we're being a little unlucky, which we're not. But some parts of the organization, like the business and communications part of the organization, at least the face they're presenting, is that they think they're doing a good job. And maybe this is just out of style at all these little conferences or like Airplane Magazine tips articles that are out there right now. But like, there is something I do miss the days where, like, clubs would have a little bit of reserve or tacitly admit things are not going well, or like
the Colorado letter from this week.
Right. There's something to that.
The closest we had was Thelwell letting Armas go
Yeah.
recently. The closest evidence that there are standards not being met and that's being acknowledged. Ever since then, Jesus Christ. I mean, I feel like needs to be driven home again for the second episode in a row. But like, Jesus Christ, we literally let a mercenary manager who openly was sick of the job stay in charge for another 6 months. He had the team in last place, and we let him leave on his own terms with a press release talking about what a sacrifice he made to be here and be in last place.
After fanning the flames of a racism scandal at the club.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how we handle things. That's how people are held accountable for failure at this club. Whereas, say what you want about Colorado and Krunke and the ownership or whatever, but that letter is at least an acknowledgement that things are not great and we're making changes. We expect better and we're making changes. There hasn't been anything like that here.
No.
It's just continued smug defiance.
It's funny. Thelwell's been doing that, at Everton.
For Everton.
Yeah. It's just like, it's crazy.
Yeah. So, predictions?
Who's the player to watch this week?
I'm going to have to actually...
One word preview.
I'm going to have to talk. I'm going to have to talk about who to watch. Because, yeah, man. I guess Nealis is suspended, right?
Yeah.
As is Troy, right?
Oh, right.
You know what? Good for him. He's
Yeah.
out of his element.
Yeah, I mean, just to go on a little thing, and I mean, like, I still don't think he's qualified for the job, and don't think the club is best served by giving him the permanent role for long term. But the idea that he's to blame for anything going on, I mean, game by game, if you want to blame him for specific tactical decisions, sure, but that's all wrapped up in the fact that there's nothing to play for this year. You don't have to be analyzing the games little by little when this team's obviously not going anywhere. And yeah, I mean, the team was literally in last place, had only won one game all year before he took over. The idea that he's what the problem is here is just asinine. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that reminds me as well of when Carnell was mentioned earlier. Obviously, St. Louis are doing pretty well right now. I even though Carnell's results here were kind of okay, or especially pretty good considering it was the COVID season too, I do think that if he were signed on permanently, I mean,
that wouldn't have been the best move. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I think that's extremely
right.
2020 hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess now I think about it, he would have been operating under Thelwell. So, yeah, I guess, if you want to entertain the hypothetical of Carnell staying in place, what you are actually entertaining is a universe where Dietrich Mateschitz does not intervene to get his buddy Gerhard Struber in place. And that allows for a timeline where the sporting director or head of sport and the manager can have a more harmonious relationship and keep on bringing in players. So you know what? I take it back. Maybe it would have worked pretty well long term.
Certainly would have worked better than what
right.
happened in real life.
My initial impulse was this is kind of like saying, oh, what if we just put Brian White up top? We'll score so many goals. Look at his XG. No. But now that I've fleshed it out with myself, I'm kind of arguing against myself, and I could see, maybe that actually would have worked because he would have had an actual sporting director to work with. So
it took season 8 for us to get into the What If series of 202.
I know, right? Next episode, clip episode. All right. Any other thoughts? I think that was an okay stab at not just circling the drain in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we were saying, this City game is the last game with stakes, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like the last game of the season almost.
Makes me feel a little, I don't know, wistful already. Anticipatory.
If we lose, that's our
nostalgia.
season. Almost for sure.
I mean, I guess also this has a really solid chance at determining which team finishes above each other in the trash heap.
Yeah.
Because it's plausible neither team wins a game for the rest of the season.
It's be a shitty 0-0 draw.
Yeah. God, I hope not. All right, with that.